Hello, Maker of Minnesota friends and fans. We have a very special event coming up. I'm hosting a series of Makers of Minnesota dinners at the Lexington in St. Paul, and I'm so excited. Not only will you be front and center with some of the best makers in the Twin Cities, but you'll be treated to a 3-course dinner, compliments of Chef Antonio from the Lexington, and he'll be using the featured makers' ingredients in all the courses that he's making for this special event. Our September dinner is Tuesday, September 28th, and tickets are $98. Our featured makers are the talented folks from Alamar Cheese, Red Table Meats, Bakersfield Flour and Bread, and Tres Leches in the Food Building in Northeast Minneapolis. We will be the exclusive diners in the restaurant for the entire evening, and you will mingle with me and your favorite makers and taste their wonderful products. And a special treat, you can even pre-order the first ever Makers of Minnesota holiday box filled with my favorite products from makers all around the Twin Cities. We'll have a limited number of tickets for this special event, and when they're gone, they're gone. So go to thelexmn.com and sign up via Eventbrite for the first Makers of Minnesota dinner featuring the talented makers of the food building, including the delicious cheese from Alamar Cheese, breads from Bakersfield Flour and Bread, meats from Red Table Meats and Elixirs, and tinctures from Tres Leches. Get your tickets now at thelexmn.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Makers of Minnesota. I'm Stephanie Hansen, and I have the pleasure of talking to cool people doing cool things in the state of Minnesota. And I have been obsessed with Bakersfield flour and breads for a long time. First, as an eater, because they're just making these tremendous breads. The Filoni is like one of my favorite things. But then as a baker myself during COVID and the whole pandemic, of course, I, like everybody else, got on the sourdough bread train and started using these heritage milled flours from Bakersfield. And we talked to Steve Horton, who was an original founder of Bakersfield, on season 2, episode 25, if you want to go back and listen to that. But the company has had an evolution. It's evolving, and they are in the food building still, working to provide bread for some of the concepts with Kieran's Kitchen. But I'm here today with Wes Gardner, who is the head baker and head miller. And I just wanted to catch up with them because we are working on a Makers of Minnesota dinner that we're going to be having at the Lexington. It's going to be the last Tuesday of every month. We're going to do one in September, October, and November. So Tuesday, September 28th will be the dinner that we're featuring all of the folks at the food building. So thanks for being on the program today, Wes.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. How long have you been with Bakersfield at this point?
Been there since the very beginning. So now it's just over 5 years.
And tell me a little bit about, in your words, what Bakersfield does, because you do things that nobody else does by milling these heritage grains that people don't even know exist.
Yeah. So very simply, we purchase mainly wheat, but different types of grain from the upper Midwest, mostly Minnesota, a little bit in the Dakotas. And we buy that grain directly from the farmers that grow it. And then we hold that grain and we mill it using 2 of our stone mills. The stone mills were made by New American Stone Mills out in Vermont. And that's a very, very awesome company, all made by hand. And so we mill it into whole grain flour, and we also have a sifting system. So we sift out the bran and the germ to get our white sifted flour. And we make all of our breads from that. And we also sell the flour too, wholesale and retail.
And I've bought it at Food Building. It's wonderful flour. I used it to make my sourdough starter, and I've used it to make all my breads. As a baker who's trained in the field of baking, obviously, what does that feel like to actually mill your own grains?
Well, I mean, the first founding principle of Bakersfield was to get closer to the source. And for us to be able to have control over that source, which, every bakery needs flour. For us to have our own flour at the freshest possible level, it opened so many new opportunities for us.
Tell me, as a baker, how do you notice the difference in like the flour that you've milled versus like if you just bought bread off or flour off of a shelf from, say, like Pillsbury?
Sure. So, I mean, once you bake the products, the bread or whatever you're making out of it, the first thing you'll notice is the flavor. We love to think of flour at Bakersfield as a produce item. It's from a plant. It's been milled and it's fresh. And just like any other produce item, it does stale after a certain amount of time. And so when we use it within a couple days of milling, we get the freshest possible flour. And you get a lot of the flavor and the nutrients that come with it too. So there's the flavor, but then you also, while you're mixing it, you may notice some differences there. You know, it is fresher again, so it's got it's higher in moisture. Basically, it hasn't been dried out like some of the flours that you find on grocery store shelves that
Right.
really have been milled months ago, probably stored in a warehouse, and then eventually put on a shelf. So,
And is that why? So when I started down the sourdough journey, I knew nothing and
yeah,
I was just following, tutorials online. And I felt like I had a lot of success early on. And I believe that was because I used your flour because it was more active. Is that correct?
yeah, that's very possible. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but like because it's
You're kind of
fresh.
almost a scientist if you're a baker. Come
Yeah,
on.
that's true. There's a lot of measurements and a lot of intuitive thinking. But yeah, I would like to think that it does have a role to play. I mean, again, it's fresher, so there's more bacteria and living organisms in the flour just because it was just milled. But there's also a higher in even our sifted bread flours. There's more bran and germ in there than your typical white bread flour, and that has a lot of nutrients and kind of a good jumping off point for the bacteria to start your culture.
Yeah. And to feed it.
Yeah,
It's just the breads that I've made, and I only use your flour. So that's all I know. But
excellent. Yeah,
people are like, "Oh, your breads look so good." I'm like, I think it must be the flour because it's certainly not me. At the holidays, you guys do something that's unique too, I think, in that you add breads to your repertoire. You do stollen, which is
yeah,
a bread that a lot of people in Minnesota eat around the holiday time. Also,
yeah.
you do a chocolate cherry bread that's fantastic. The hot cross buns. As a baker, you have like certain things in your repertoire. I mentioned the bologna. You've got a wheat bread. You've got a great sandwich bread. What is that bread called? Is it which something?
Yeah, Good Witch of the North, kind of just a play on the Wizard of Oz. But yeah, it's a good sandwich bread is basically what we're trying to say there.
And that's no small like feat. A good sandwich bread because it has to have the right heft. It has to have the right
Yeah,
crumb.
yeah, absolutely. We played around with that. That was not one of our original breads, but one of our bakers developed it, and it took a little while to catch on. But I mean, it's one of our biggest sellers. If we had more oven space, we would probably bake just Good Witch. But we also now have so Good Witch is kind of a whiter bread. And now we have a whole grain sandwich bread that we're calling Mill City Wheat. And it's a little bit smaller than the Good Witch, but it's a phenomenal sandwich bread.
When you're just like making your bread of your choice, what's your favorite to make or to eat?
I mean, really, when I make bread, I really enjoy the simplest type. And a lot of our breads are very simple. The Filoni, like you mentioned, is just flour, water, and salt. And the Complete, which has also been one of my all-time favorites, is just whole grain flour, water, and salt. And there's processes while you're mixing and fermenting that change things, but just with three ingredients, you just get incredible breads. And so I love making that and kind of tweaking it here and there. And then just being able to had literally just had a sandwich with the Complete. It's so satisfying to know that it's so simple and so good.
The Filoni, I'm sure you've had this, but have you ever made avocado toast with it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's just like the texture of the bread and the toasting of it, and then put in that creamy avocado with some big salt crystals. And if you're
Yeah.
feeling fancy, a little quick pickled radish. Yum.
Yeah.
It's just like the best.
I love the contrast in the textures because the inside's so soft, but then you get the ear on top is so crunchy and it's great.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite breads. So you guys are selling your flours at a food building, and you
Mhm.
also have breads there that people can buy, and then wholesale too.
Yeah.
Are there wholesalers that are your favorites or that you like to direct people to where they can buy breads that are places outside a food building?
Yeah, I mean, they all are our favorites.
Sure,
But
sure.
we sell mainly to the natural food co-ops in the Twin Cities metro, and we're so fortunate to have such a large co-op community here. So we're in East Side Co-op in Northeast Minneapolis. We're in both Stewart locations, the Wedge. We're in St. Paul now at the Mississippi Market location.
I noticed that and I was thrilled because I used to get the bread at Golden Fig, which still carries
Yes.
it too.
Yeah.
But when I saw it at the co-op, I was like, hooray.
Yeah, we're there with Break Bread, who's a local St. Paul bakery that uses our flour, and it's cool just to have two small bakeries there filling their shelves, and hopefully we can continue to grow there. We're also in the Kowalski locations, not every day and not with all of our breads, but it's something that we're working on. And Kowalski's Grand in St. Paul is actually the biggest one that we sell to.
And they have their own pretty robust bread selections of that
Yes.
they make. So I was surprised when I saw yours there because I got my bologna loaf there one day because I shopped there
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, we're really glad we're in there. They are doing a great job trying to highlight the local community and
Yep.
for us to be there. They're a larger business than a lot of the co-ops, and so they have a lot of other people to do business with, and we're fortunate to be one of them. We also are now in Fresh Time, our first national grocery store chain, and that one's in Prospect Park off University. So
I love that store.
yeah, it's really happening location right now. It's right by Surly and a couple. There's going to be a distillery there and Malcolm Yards.
Yeah.
So same thing with Kowalski's. They're big, and for us to be in there, even just a small presence is really cool.
I love that. And do you get involved in like, do you like, okay, these are the stores we're in, these are the holes, like, so you get involved in planning, like who's going to make those sales calls and.
Yeah, in the past, it has been just the managers, the bakers, and Kieran Folliard, who owns Bakersfield and Food Building. It's really just been a small group of people that have just trying to get our foot in the door at these places. We do have a sales manager, brand ambassador, basically, at the Food Building now, Jill Holter, who's got great experience, and she's just awesome at her job. And she knows all the right people to talk to, and she knows how to pester them. So
she sure does. She is the person that helped me get you guys involved in this dinner that we're doing at the Lex. We'll have you be our featured makers, all of the folks in the food building for our September dinner. And I don't know what's on the menu yet because Chef Antonio is still putting that together. You don't have any idea, do you?
Well, I just met him the other day, actually, for the first time, and he was looking at our brioche. And I know he's made some really good pastas before, so maybe some flour involved, but yeah, we shall see.
All right, I'm looking forward to it, and those details, when we have them available, will be in the show notes here. So I just wanted to catch up with you guys. I'm a big fan. It's super nice to meet you. Next time I'm in food building, I'll make sure I wave.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for being on the call today and for being on Makers in Minnesota. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Have a good day.
Bye-bye, Wes.
Bye.
Okay, so now that you've heard from Bakersfield Flour and Bread, I bet you are as excited as I am to taste their delicious breads. Join me for the first ever Makers in Minnesota dinner at the Lexington in St. Paul on Grand Avenue. I can't wait to meet you and introduce you to some of my favorite Twin Cities makers from the food building in Northeast Minneapolis. So get your tickets to thelexmn.com. But hurry, this special event won't be available long. We will sell out the restaurant for this special evening alone, so make sure that you get your tickets. You can go to thelexmn.com and join us for the first annual Makers in Minnesota dinner, September 28th at the Lex.